Good morning, everybody. It's Monday, August 19th, and this is the AgYield War Room. I'm Dan Dempsey, and I'll be moderating today's session. As always, if you've got any questions or comments, please feel free to drop us a line in the chat area, and we'll be sure to get to it during the show. Quickly here, overnight markets had December corn up 3/4 at 393 1/4. November soybeans were up 3 1/4 at 960 1/4, and December Chicago wheat was down 5 at 547 1/2. This morning, the USDA announced a couple of export sales, 332,000 metric tons of soybeans to China for 24, and 110,000 metric tons of soybeans to unknown destinations also for 24. So a good start to the week there. See some business being done. Dustin, we talked a little bit about before the show, just about, potential, maybe a little shift in a couple of the weather models here overnight. Share a few thoughts with us there, and we'll kick it around the room to start the week.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, Ben actually was just mentioning it before the show here. The difference in the GFS and European pattern, GFS is definitely looking like it's got a lot more heat in the West, but both of them have quite a reduction in expected precipitation in the next 2 weeks. So, it's not to say that it's going to cause any major stirs, but certainly is going to be something that if we get to the end of the 2-week period with very little rain, I think there'll still be a kind of that question of how we're finishing out, especially when you look at beans. Beans also are, I think have a bigger impact on the Brazilian real, which we continue to find some support. It's held its recent bounce off the lows. So yeah, we're at one point up, pretty good last night on the bean market, and we got all these extra sales reported this morning. I think it could be an interesting start to the week for beans.
Yeah, Ben, maybe a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, we keeping in perspective how far we've come, how much bearishness we've factored in. There's no it's no secret that beans need really good finishing weather. I think the fact that we had a lot of beans that were planted late as well, it's August 19th, stretching that kind of weather out another couple of weeks into mid-September, the market might take notice here that maybe we've overshot it for the minute, and that we're going to see the highest number that we see for bean yields all year was the 53.2. So I don't think that soybeans have the overhanging old crop issue that has to be rectified in first notice day as well. And I think that you've got an options expiration towards the end of the week where, people are typically forced to manage short options a little more actively than they do long options. So there's probably more than a few people that have had on some really profitable put positions, and they may have to manage those this week. So I would be shocked if beans have as harsh of a down week this week as they had last week. I don't know if there's enough yet to make anyone really want to cover, but there should be enough to make your typical day trader, the people that are trading the trend, want to pile into a short at this juncture. I think there's should be a little bit of a break on the bean decline. Hopefully we can put together something that would show us a little bit of a bounce. Maybe the shorts get a little bit nervous and decide to take a little more profits more aggressively. So I think corn has still got to deal with, we've been down here. We've traded down in this area for quite a while. So I would not expect any big surprises from positions. And then we get to find out, to Dustin's point, going into Monday, Tuesday next week, Wednesday, do we have some people that are oversubscribed on this short in corn?
This is like a Twitter week Super Bowl, or X Twitter, whatever you want to call it, week Super Bowl with Pro Farmer this week. The tweets will be flying. They will be, obviously they start East and West and come together to announce their final crop estimates there on Thursday night. So state by state gets released each evening. They have a dinner and talk and go through it all. So it'll be interesting to see, you look at, I was looking this morning at the, historically it's pretty close to the same path, and they've got their methodologies and whatnot, but if you look at where they're going, I mean, it's literally the cream of the crop. I mean, so by all estimations, if they're not cherry picking, we should you should see some pretty spectacular yield estimates, I would guess, this week. So just one thing to be cognizant of as we head through the week. Jace, a couple of thoughts there.
No, I agree with you. I agree with, kind of what everybody was saying. Not a lot of news that we haven't talked about over the last couple of weeks. I agree that the forecast right now is a little drier, right? So we got to finish it. I think we've talked a lot about how to get the really big yield numbers in corn and beans. We got to finish it well. I was been out of the loop for the last couple of days. I was kind of driving through northern Illinois. Crops looked really good. On our farms recently, caught some really good rains. We've been running pivots for a while in our area. Nothing too serious, right? But if you got the pivots, you run them when you need some rain, and you try to get it perfect all the time. So we were getting a little on the drier side, plenty of subsoil moisture in general, but we just caught some really good rains, and so not running pivots right now, but we'll be running them, especially with this forecast, we'll be running them again. But all in all, and not a whole lot to add, right? I agree with you. The crop tour is going to find really good crops, and I imagine they'll put out some pretty big yield estimates. They'll have a lot to add other than that. So
yeah, it'll be interesting because like on the crop tour, just anecdotally, I know I was talking to some guys in Northwestern Illinois end of last week, and they're, obviously beans at this point are super difficult to try to yield estimate, right? Like people have been 40, 50 years of farming and they're like, I can never nail my beans, right?
Right.
But they are seeing well potted beans, or the I guess the chance for a big yield is still there, right? The prospects of a big yield are still there. So it'll be interesting because on the crop tour, you do get historical, pod counts versus previous years. So that will be interesting to see if that's a carryover through, Iowa, Indiana, the whole belt there, just from what we've heard, some anecdotal reports. But
yeah, you would imagine they're going to find a lot of big beans with a lot of pods.
I would think. I mean, if they don't, then we're trying to cheer for something. I mean, it's
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, even on the corn estimates, right? I mean, they're going to count ear sizes, and they're going to see big ears, and like I said, as long as they're not cherry picking, it obviously a big part of the yield is the fill, right, and the test weights and how that's going to finish, right? And it's kind of it's a really big deal, right? And that's really hard to do at this time of year, to figure out how that's gonna finish. So you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, right? If they put a big number out.
Yeah, definitely.
And they kind of take all their information, right, and then they come up with
their opinion a little bit,
right? And they kind of still come up with their opinion of what they think the national yield's going to be. So.
That's why I think it's. I mean, I know personally. I mean, just speaking for myself, like it's kind of a litmus test for me this year. Like where you at on this thing? Because we talk to and work with enough growers in that path where I think it's going to be hard to hide.
Yeah.
Personally, I mean, it proved me wrong, but it just doesn't feel like you could do it this year.
Right.
Of all the years.
Right. You have to really try.
You're going to have to really try.
I mean, this was a little while ago, but I drove, from northern Illinois all the way down to Nashville and back. So all through the state of Illinois, and it was hard. It was hard to find a field when you're going down the interstate and you're looking. And you can find a little spot here and there, but just like looks tabletop. And obviously that's, going 80 miles an hour down the interstate. But I agree with you. All through northern Illinois, all through central Illinois, it's hard to find anything that doesn't look really, really good.
So. Yeah, and put it in context, I wonder how much is priced into the market. Because right now, I mean, the USDA's most recent report is calling for Illinois to be 11 bushels above the previous all-time record. Right. So that's a pretty big beat. So I think that's what we would expect. I think that how bad, for the USDA yield to be where it is, they did have some, pretty big reductions in Minnesota, but they still had Nebraska at a record. They still had tying its previous record. They still had South Dakota tying its previous record. They had Iowa 4 bushels above its previous record, I believe. They're still, I think Iowa probably is really good in most spots besides that northwest corner.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the USDA's already gave us a pretty good playbook of what they should write down. Can it be much beyond 11 bushels above previous record? Certainly could. I just don't know how much the market's pricing that in. And you hear just different stories of like, and this might be the cherry picking, or, you hear just the bad stuff here and there online about disease pressure in Iowa, and that this could be the type of year where that surprises us still. So that's why I will be curious to see what they're finding.
The narrative in the field. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting.
It could be disease pressure, right? That I think right now, everyone's like us, they're expecting to write down huge crops. So if they get in there and they find like, some poor situations, this could be where the crop tour is really beneficial to hear from them. So
sure. Well, and you bring up a good point. Like they're going to get into that southern Minnesota stuff towards Wednesday, Tuesday, I think late Tuesday into Wednesday. So your final parting shot is going to be that Minnesota area. And, we've got clients through that area that, Dustin, that you've referenced multiple times on the show, that there is a problem there. I mean, that you can't hide behind it. It's just going to be what is,
So how are they going to quantify that, right? Like, are they going to walk into a spot that's just a zero and then like, oh, there's no corn here, and then walk into a field, and then, oh, here's a field. Question. Right. So that's going to be
I would guess that, I would hope that they get a sample that's reflective of an area. I mean, I would think that somebody probably told them to do that, would be my guess. But and honestly, much like we did with Hornig, or the guy from USDA, I'm sure people are going to lob questions at him like, what do you, like, what's your thoughts on how they did this? Because if I can't remember, Ben, I think you've been to one. They talk about the last night, if I remember right, they'll talk about the methodology for the whole thing when they give the final deal, right? I'm pretty sure they do that.
They talk about the methodology, and then they take some liberties with what things look like to finish, and that's been a thing. I think it doesn't frustrate me. I appreciate the efforts of people going out and taking their time to do it, and we wish them very safe travel. So I don't want this to come off that way, but and it's not necessarily for me. But I think it was last year, 22. That there was some liberties taken at the end with finishing weather, which they kind of have to do, but that's your plus or minus degree of what it actually winds up in. And it's hard, it's a hard thing to finish. And I think more so for soybeans at this time, probably than corn. So.
Yeah. I think the Minnesota problems would be just all the 10-15% of a field that's a zero. The rest of the field might look really good, right? So Jason's point, you might have a pretty large reduction in Minnesota from all the zeros. Like, well, how did you randomly stop at that 10 to 15% versus not? Like that would be probably really hard to do.
Right.
So I would be curious to see if anyone, when we get into that region, will probably be watching that and see what they have to say about that.
So just to come back, Ben, you bring up a good point about the finishing weather. So from what we've saw this morning, we referenced it right at the beginning. Are we looking at a changing pattern here in the 10 to 14 day? I mean, are we thinking hotter, drier, or are they still conflicted?
There's a little bit of conflicting in the models, but I think they're both drier. I think there's a difference in heat on GFS versus Euro, and you just don't know which way it's going to lean. And we've discussed this before. I typically really like the Euro, and the GFS has been more accurate this year. Not by a ton, but it has been.
Oh, it has, yeah. And so I think the Euro is calling for 0.8 of an inch on a weighted average for beans across the next 2 weeks. Right, across the weighted average for the whole country.
So that's not a lot of water.
Yeah, and 0.7 for the GFS, but the temp difference, 2.7 bushel or 2.7 degrees above normal for GFS versus 1.1 degree above normal for European. So definitely more heat in the GFS and a little bit less rain.
Okay. Very good. Well, guys, we just came into the open here. We've got December corn up 3/4 at 393 1/4. November soybeans up 4 3/4 at 962. And December Chicago wheat is down 5.5 at 547. If you like the show as much as we like putting it on, give us a like or subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything to do so. Keeps you up to speed on everything AgYield, gets you access to premium content. So we certainly appreciate everybody tuning in every day. So if you would, please give us a like or subscribe. Every day that the markets are open, we're streaming live on X, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, 8:15 Central Time. Appreciate the thoughts and comments here this morning, guys. It was a good conversation. Hope everybody has a great start to the week, and we look forward to talking again tomorrow.
Thanks, Dan.
The War Room is proudly presented by AgYield. For over 50 years, the AgYield team has provided grain marketing and risk management solutions for growers across the country. Our veteran consultants harness cutting-edge technologies to pinpoint risk, optimize market performance, and protect your farm's profitability. Discover a new approach to farm revenue management at agyield.com.
Hey guys, Jack here. Be sure to support the show by hitting the like button, leaving us a comment, and subscribing to the channel for all the latest updates. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.